You asked for it, guys. Jesus to fight Chuck Norris. Now this will be a battle between the immortals. So we will just have some fun. Maybe Chuck Norris is killable.
I know I'm about to speak blasphemy here, but Chuck Norris ain't God. Unless... And it's time for another unbuckled bumpy ride with your guide, the stark raving LEAN-atic himself. I'm Jim. Let's jump right in again. Welcome to my podcast based on my brand new book, available on Amazon, Live Life Lean, L-E-A-N. It's a year-long guide to gratitude and our daily grind. The book that combines some timeless wisdom from a whole lot of the world's wiser people with the reflections, reactions, and wisecracks of the guide's author, me. And it guides you, the reader, through the simplest system for a happy, healthy, authentic, and genuinely grateful everyday experience. I urge you to get the book. Of course I do. I wrote it. It's either at Amazon or at my website, ampurage.com. A-M-M-P-U-R-A-G-E. But even without it, let's make next week better than last, our next year better than the past, and get started now with today's episode of Chuck Norris Ain't God. Unless it has been asked if God made us before we made God. But did anyone ask Chuck Norris what he says about this? Were the Ten Commandments merely suggestions, really more like guidelines? They could have been called the 10 Chuck Commandments. Could it be that the Bible, the B-I-B-L-E, really is just a blockbuster? The blockbuster, the original blockbuster, about the real buster of blocks and bricks and boards, etc.? In the beginning was the Word? No. In the beginning was the which. The W-H-I-C-H. The which came first. You know, like, which came first? The chicken or the egg? That's easy. Which came first? The egg or the chicken? No. Chuck Norris came first. And it was heard to be said, let there be light. Because the dark is afraid of Chuck Norris. And all that is, it only exists due to divine creation. There is no theory of evolution, just a long list of creatures that Chuck Norris has allowed to live. Except the serpent in the Garden of Eden, because that snake, once it had bit Chuck Norris, it died 2 days later. And on the third day, well, it stayed dead because it saw Chuck Norris's shadow. Fast forward now to the year AD 1. He, the Chuck, was reborn, as it had been foretold, in Bethlehem on Christmas Day, surrounded by admiring shepherds and kings from all over and faraway lands, because they had seen from afar, no, not a star, but the world's largest hospital that Chuck Norris actually built himself ahead of time in order to be born in, because there was no manger awesome enough for Chuck Norris. Book 2. Years later, young Chuck was not to be found. Chuck's earthen-loving family earthlings, lovely Mary and Joseph, realized that Chuck was missing. So they searched Jerusalem for 3 days, and they found young Chuck Norris in the temple. Chuck Norris, being Chuck Norris, doing only what he could, sitting in the corner of a perfectly round room, in discussion with the elders. They were amazed at him knowing absolutely everything, especially given his young age. But mostly, they wanted to know why the young Chuck Norris never needed to flush any toilet, because he simply scared the crap right out of it. And more time passed. When Chuck Norris went to the river in Book 3, the River Jordan, to be baptized by a man from the wilderness named John, But John tried to deter him, saying, "It is I who needs to be baptized." But Chuck insisted. And, well, of course, he's Chuck Norris. John submersed Chuck Norris to baptize him, but Chuck stayed submersed for 3 days. And when Chuck Norris arose, he explained that he'd just won an underwater breathing contest against a fish. And when Chuck Norris stepped from the waters of the River Jordan, Chuck was bone dry. Because when Chuck Norris walks in or on water, Chuck Norris does not get wet. It's the water that gets chucked. Chuck Norris knelt to give thanks and then pushed himself back up. But the world was temporarily thrown from its normal rotation. Because when Chuck Norris does a push-up, he isn't lifting himself. He's pushing the earth down. Next, Chuck Norris went to spend 40 days in the wilderness. And to gain the best vantage point, Chuck Norris did not climb trees. He just pulled them down and walked on top of them. It was in that wilderness that Chuck Norris was tempted by the mad Titan, but would not bow to the evil Thanos. Instead, Chuck Norris painlessly passed 6 kidney stones, which legend has it Thanos would later use to wipe out half of all life in the universe, but only half, because Thanos knew that when the Hulk gets angry, he turns into Chuck Norris. In Book 4, Chuck Norris healed the sick. He healed a man who was blind, a man who could not walk, and a man wrapped in bandages. Legend even had it that Chuck Norris's tears could cure cancer. Too bad, Chuck Norris does not cry. Ever. Then there was the storm, the hurricane, whose name no one remembered because it was not named Hurricane Chuck. A boat carrying the followers of Chuck Norris was buffeted by the waves, and shortly before dawn, Chuck went out to them, walking on the water. When the disciples saw him walking on water, they were terrified. But Chuck Norris said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." And Chuck continued by saying, "Look upon the sky and witness the stars as they fall. I call this a meteor shower. And when I see a meteor shower," Chuck Norris said, "I grab a bar of soap." But the men were still frightened because their understanding was limited. Because some things that they saw Chuck Norris miraculously do made no sense. Because they'd seen some people ride bikes without handlebars, but they saw Chuck Norris ride handlebars without a bike. In Book 6, the legend of Chuck Norris had his ministry take him on travels through the lands and spread the word far and wide, and how he could show them a different way of life. And as he traveled, he was challenged by no man, by no warrior, because the armies of Rome knew all too well that Chuck Norris can kill 2 stones with 1 bird. That he had killed 50 people with a gun, and then he started firing, before the gun was even invented. And it was because of all that Chuck Norris could do, that there was peace throughout the land. In Book 7 came the Last Supper. He gathered his 12 disciples together for a final meal, known as the Last Supper, and explained to them that his arrest was necessary. He would permit it because he's Chuck Norris. He had a table laid out on top of a bear skin rug on the floor. The bear was not dead. It was just afraid to move because, well, you know, Chuck. Chuck Norris had never hosted a supper before, so some things were different, but still good. He took bread and wine, blessed it, and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Chuck does not live by bread alone." And then he even cut through a solid knife with hot butter. Followers still today remember this when they celebrate Holy Chuck Communion. In Book 8, legend varies, honestly, about what really happened when Chuck went to the Mount of Olives and to the Garden of Gethsemane. Some say he asked his followers to pray, but others claim he asked them to play hide and seek, and instantaneously he found all 11 remaining followers simultaneously after having closed his eyes and counted to the number infinity twice, because he was Chuck Norris. The one accounting that no historian disputes is the 2 legions of Roman traffic patrol officers who pulled Chuck Norris over on the way to the garden. He let them all off with a warning. In Book 9, after allowing himself to be arrested, tried, and crucified, Chuck Norris cheated death, as we know it. Because as everyone knows, well, he's different. Death, it appears, Death once had a near Chuck Norris experience. Finally, in Book 10, Chuck Norris, it is believed, will never die, but has the power to come and go as he pleases anywhere but Hollywood. See, Hollywood finally gave Chuck Norris a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, but they had to remove it the very next day, because nobody crosses Chuck Norris and lives. The words of this storyline were divinely inspired because Chuck Norris doesn't actually write books. The words just assemble themselves in order out of fear. His story and legend have a happy ending, as all good things must come to an end. Except Chuck Norris. Okay, that was stupid. I mean, freaking silly, huh? Yeah. And so it is with all such things. Absolutely any such silly thing that we elevate to be our substitute for God. Feelings or fame, drugs or money, or even Hollywood legends. Making anything into our God, anything that did not make us, is a mistake for us. Almost the end. Because there was the beginning. Because in the beginning, God said, "Let there be light." And there was Chuck Norris who said, "Say please." And now, more words of wisdom to wow your socks off from the Live Life Lean Guide itself. Entry number 162. Tell me where to go. All right. I will go to hell then. Mark Twain. And the guide's point of view on this? But it's only 'cause I'm warning the devil ahead of time who's following right behind me. Cue Chuck Norris. So what do you think about this? Using the Live Life Lean Guided system, what have you learned lately that's new? What have you earned that wasn't just handed to you? Where have you added to the world beyond just around you? Now be grateful for all of it, reflect on it, respect it, and navigate somewhere next. Thank you for listening. I hope you're enjoying your copy of the Live Life Lean, LEAN guide, enjoying it almost as much as I did creating it. And if you don't have a copy yet, go on over to amperage.com or Amazon and get started today experiencing the amazing power of knowing every day is literally yours to be grateful about. And you need never feel unfulfilled again. I'm Jim Hall. And until next time, good health, God bless. And now, go get a little dirty learning something new. Earning what's not given to you. Adding to this crazy world that we share. And navigating your way to something new and next.